The impatient man speaks quickly, not realizing that his voice is the leash that binds him. He reveals his thoughts, his motives, and the limits of his understanding before the game has even begun. In his eagerness to assert control, he relinquishes it. He thinks speaking gives him power, yet it is power that slips through his fingers with every word. The silent man, by contrast, chooses stillness, not because he has nothing to say, but because he has already calculated the cost of every syllable. He understands that in war, in court, in the marketplace of influence, silence is a sword sharper than silver. It cuts without motion, kills without touch, and leaves no trace. To remain silent is not to be weak. It is to reserve your power until the time is ripe. A lion does not roar before the kill. It stalks in silence, waiting for the moment its prey is most vulnerable. The same is true in the realm of power. To speak is to reveal, and revelation is vulnerability. When you say what you want, they know how to deny you. When you say what you fear, they know how to break you. When you declare your beliefs, you give them the tools to trap you in them. But when you are silent, you cannot be captured. No one knows where your loyalties lie. No one knows your next move. You become unpredictable, and the unpredictable man terrifies everyone. Silence allows the strategist to command the most dangerous weapon of all time. While the noisy ones burn their influence trying to be seen and heard, the silent man waits in the shadows, measuring every movement around him. He studies the players, learns their rhythms, and allows their impatience to destroy them. One reveals a weakness in his ambition. Another exposes a hidden agenda through a slip of the tongue. A third grows desperate in the vacuum of silence and speaks too much, too soon. In a world of reckless expression, silence is rebellion. It is control. It is a deliberate refusal to participate in chaos. In councils, in negotiations, in any contest of wills, the one who speaks least often holds the greatest sway. People begin to measure their words more carefully in your presence. They second, guess themselves. They interpret your stillness as confidence. They fear they are being judged. Silence forces them to carry the weight of the conversation. It makes them vulnerable to their own projections. They begin to imagine what you are thinking. They assume you know more than you do. And in trying to guess your thoughts, they often expose their own. The patient strategist uses silence as a trap. He lets others fill the void with their own noise. He allows their desperation to surface. The longer they speak, the more likely they are to make mistakes. Words pile up like dry wood, and eventually something ignites. They contradict themselves. They make promises they cannot keep. They reveal plans they thought were hidden. And all the while, the silent man listens not to respond, but to dominate, not to win an argument, but to win the entire game. Silence is not absence. It is pressure. It builds tension. It breeds uncertainty. And in that uncertainty, power is born. The one who masters silence bends reality in his favor. He makes others reveal themselves while he remains undefined. He becomes the blank page upon which others write their secrets. Their assumptions become their shackles. Their voices become their confessions. And he, without lifting a finger, writes their fate with his quiet. The patient strategist knows that the battle is rarely won by force. It is won by precision, by restraint, and most of all, by timing. He knows that timing requires patience, and patience is only possible when silence is embraced as an ally. In silence, he sharpens his awareness. He deciphers patterns. He watches the prideful dig their own graves with passionate speeches. He waits not out of fear, but out of certainty that the moment will come when one word, spoken at the right time, will carry the weight of 1,000. Until then, he says nothing. Power is not in the volume of one's voice, but in its absence. A man who speaks too often, too eagerly, too passionately, believes he is asserting dominance. In truth, he is laying his soul bare to be dissected. Each word is a step toward his own undoing, for in speech, one reveals not only what he thinks, but how he thinks. His ambitions, his insecurities, his illusions, all spill out in the open. He is no longer a mystery, but a map. And once a man is mapped, he can be manipulated. Those who speak freely do not realize how much of themselves they expose. Their fears are disguised as anger. Their insecurities are cloaked in pride. They argue not to persuade, but to be seen. And in doing so, they make themselves predictable. Predictability is death to influence. Once others can anticipate your thoughts, your beliefs, your reactions, they can disarm you before the battle even begins. You become a puppet controlled by your own transparency. But the man who holds his tongue holds his power. He speaks only when necessary, and when he does, it is deliberate. His silence provokes uncertainty. It forces others to fill the space with their own assumptions. They begin to question what he knows, what he wants, what he's hiding. In this confusion, they grow anxious. They talk more, reveal more, expose more. Silence, therefore, becomes a psychological weapon. It turns the noise of others into an echo chamber of confession. The more one speaks, the more value he strips from his words. Familiarity breeds contempt, and repetition breeds irrelevance. A man who cannot stop talking cheapens his voice. No one listens after a while because his words carry no weight. But when a man is known to be silent, even a whisper from him is treated as a decree. Silence gives value to speech. It builds scarcity, and scarcity creates demand. People strain to hear what the silent man might say next, not because his voice is loud, but because it is rare. The loud man is easily baited. He reacts to every comment, every insult, every challenge. He cannot bear to be misunderstood, so he explains. He cannot resist a provocation, so he responds. In his need to clarify, defend, or justify, he becomes transparent. His emotions control him, but the one who says nothing cannot be pulled into games. He does not explain himself. He lets others believe what they will. His silence forces them to guess, and in guessing, they expose their own position. Silence is the fortress of the mind. In it, a man is untouchable. He observes without being observed, judges without being judged. The more he listens, the more information he gathers. The more he gathers, the more he understands. He watches others drown in their own words while he remains afloat, untouched by their noise. He waits while they burn their strategies in the fires of emotion. He needs no audience, no validation. His silence is self-sufficiency. In every room, there is power in being the quietest voice. Others speak over each other in a desperate attempt to be heard, to matter, to lead. But the silent man watches this chaos and says nothing. His quiet presence becomes intimidating. People sense he sees more than he shows. They begin to address him with caution. They watch his eyes for reactions. They begin to adapt their behavior, not to offend or provoke him. They feel his power without ever hearing it. When a man does not speak, people speak for him. They speculate about his motives, his opinions, his next move. They fear the unknown, and he becomes the unknown. He becomes a mirror, reflecting back to others what they project. They call him wise, not because they've heard wisdom from his lips, but because they cannot read him. And people always mistake mystery for mastery. That illusion becomes his greatest advantage. The man who masters silence becomes the sculptor of perception. Others may build their image through noise, but he builds his through absence. He is not involved in the scramble for attention, because he is already being watched. Not for what he says, but for what he does not say. His silence becomes legend. His presence becomes myth. And myth commands more loyalty, more fear, and more obedience than any argument ever could. There is no greater act of dominance than refusing to engage. The fool believes every attack demands a response, every insult a counterblow, every accusation a defense. He walks into traps laid by his own pride. He takes the bait not out of necessity, but out of weakness. He wants to be understood, justified, proven right, and in this desire he makes himself vulnerable. But the one who remains silent absorbs the chaos and reflects nothing back. He creates a void, a blank surface where the enemy's anger finds no foothold. In silence, he denies the opposition the satisfaction of combat. He kills momentum with stillness. He defeats force by offering no resistance. To speak is to legitimize. The moment you answer a provocation, you validate its importance. You accept the terms of the conflict set by someone else. You acknowledge that their words can move you, that their presence is worthy of reply. But when you are silent, you do not just withhold language. You withhold your acknowledgement of their power. Silence becomes a refusal to kneel, not a failure to act. You rob the enemy of the one thing they crave, significance. There is a particular kind of madness that overtakes those who cannot provoke a reaction. The attacker wants noise. He wants you to yell, to curse, to retaliate. He wants your pride to step forward and take the blow. But when your pride is restrained, when you meet fire with stillness, he is left alone with his rage. He begins to unravel. The silence becomes a mirror, showing him the futility of his aggression. He expected resistance. He planned for battle, but there is no war because you refused to make it one. This is the art of psychological dominance. It is the art of watching your enemy bleed out from their own wounds while you remain untouched. Let them raise their voice until they sound absurd. Let them accuse you of things you never dignify with response. Let them argue against an opponent who refuses to materialize. Over time, their anger turns inward. They begin to doubt themselves. They question whether you're even listening, whether you even care. That doubt becomes erosion. Their confidence crumbles in the silence they cannot penetrate. True power does not need to speak to be known. The man who chooses silence over spectacle demonstrates discipline, and discipline is always feared more than passion. Anyone can rage, anyone can shout, but to endure insult, humiliation, or betrayal without a single word is to reveal a mind forged in iron. Silence becomes a demonstration of superiority so stark, it humiliates the enemy more than any insult ever could. It shows that their words are not worthy of an answer, that they do not even register. In the court of public opinion, silence also serves a deeper tactic. The one who remains quiet forces observers to focus not on him, but on the one who shouts. He becomes the stage upon which the enemy destroys himself. The louder they speak, the more they appear desperate, unhinged, weak. The man who says nothing allows his opponent to look like a madman in front of the crowd. He invites judgment, not by defending himself, but by letting the other reveal too much. When one is silent, he chooses to speak through consequences, not conversation. He lets actions speak, and when they do, they speak with the weight of silence behind them. His punishments are never promised, never warned of. They simply arrive, swift and final, with no debate. Those who once mocked his silence begin to fear it. They begin to wonder what he is planning. They sense that silence is not surrender, but strategy. It becomes a storm waiting behind still waters. Even in personal relationships and private betrayal, silence has a sharper edge than retaliation. It becomes a void that cannot be filled, a space where guilt and anxiety multiply unchecked. The betrayer wants confrontation. They want closure. They want to argue and absolve themselves, but silence denies them the theater. It denies them the spotlight. It traps them in the cell of their own conscience. The absence of your words becomes the presence of their torment. He who knows how to remain silent holds the leash of the world's loudest dogs. They bark, they howl, they tear at the air, hoping to force him into the arena. But he never enters. He watches from the gates unmoved. The chaos rages beneath him, and yet he remains the master of it all because he does not flinch. He does not perform. He does not answer. He watches his enemies rot in the shadows. They cast themselves in the chambers where power breathes behind veils, and every glance conceals a blade. It is not the loudest who reign, but the quietest. Those who govern through spectacle, through constant declaration, through empty bravado. They are never feared, only watched, and eventually replaced. In the true court, the court where decisions weigh more than gold, and where one wrong sentence can mean exile or execution, silence is not absence, it is strategy. The man who speaks only when necessary turns every word into gold. He makes kings lean forward to hear him. He makes enemies uneasy with his presence alone. He becomes valuable because he is rare. The one who knows how to speak little, and only when it matters, becomes the most listened to. His silence is interpreted as depth, as wisdom, as strength. Even when he says nothing, his reputation speaks volumes. Others craft legends around his quiet. They imagine he knows more than he reveals. They fear what he might be thinking, and in that fear, they become cautious. They begin to offer more than is needed, speak more than they should, confess without being asked. The quiet man extracts information without ever requesting it, simply by allowing others to fill the silence they cannot endure. In the court, where everyone is trying to be seen, the man who remains unseen becomes the most visible. While others compete for attention, he lets his absence make the noise. His silence separates him. It makes him unpredictable, ungraspable. The king's fool is loud. The king's advisor is reserved. The wise man in power uses silence to create an atmosphere around himself, one that cannot be penetrated by gossip or manipulation. He lets others assume, speculate, and argue among themselves. In their confusion, he grows more formidable. A loud voice is a liability in places where power is traded in whispers. One overheard sentence, one unguarded opinion, one careless remark can shift alliances and seal fates. The one who values silence understands that words are not tools, they are weapons. And every weapon misused turns against its wielder. Silence, however, never betrays. It does not echo in ears that weren't meant to hear it. It does not create enemies where there were none. It does not bind you to a position you might later abandon. It is the shield that protects you, while others bleed from their own mouths. Silence is also a form of ownership. In remaining quiet, you take command of the room. You choose when to speak, and in doing so, you define the rhythm of discourse. You are not swept up in the momentum of others. You force them to wait, to wonder. You make them react to your stillness. Your pauses become filled with weight. People begin to study your expressions, trying to decipher meaning in what you don't say. They begin to speak more carefully around you. They adjust their tone. Their words grow defensive. You bend the court without ever lifting a hand. In the world of influence, mystery is more potent than knowledge. The man who is always talking gives himself away. The one who keeps his silence is never fully known, and what cannot be known cannot be controlled. In rooms of ambition and betrayal, your greatest weapon is the illusion that you are above it all, that you see everything but say nothing, that you are aware but not involved. This illusion makes others behave as though they are in your presence, even when you are absent. When the powerful speak rarely, their words are remembered. When they remain silent, their silence is interpreted. They become the object of speculation, respect, and fear. Their silence is not emptiness, but presence. It hovers in the room long after they've left. It becomes a part of their identity. The court knows that when such a man does speak, it is never random, never accidental. It is calculated, it is final. And those who fail to understand this truth learn too late that in the court of kings, it is not the man who speaks loudest who commands the most, but the one who speaks least. There is a unique power in not defining yourself. In a world where men rush to announce who they are, what they believe, what they intend, the one who remains silent becomes a blank canvas. And it is this very emptiness that drives people to paint upon it their own fears, desires, assumptions, and anxieties. Silence is not mere restraint. It is psychological warfare. The one who withholds his voice manipulates perception not by speaking, but by refusing to speak at all. In doing so, he allows others to construct a version of him in their minds, and it is often far more powerful, more dangerous, more mysterious than anything he could have built with words. To speak is to define yourself, to draw borders around your identity. It is to say, I am this and not that. But once defined, you are understood. Once understood, you are manageable. You are categorized, filed away, and prepared for manipulation. The man who speaks too much arms others with clarity. They know what pleases him. They know what enrages him. They know what moves him. And with that knowledge, they build tools to control him. But the man who remains silent gives them no such clarity. His silence becomes a fog that distorts everything. They are left guessing, and in their guessing, they reveal themselves. People cannot tolerate a void. When they do not know who you are, they will invent stories about you. One man will assume you are wise and calculating. Another will imagine you are arrogant and cruel. A third will fear you as a threat to his ambition. And though none may be true, all serve your purpose. For when people craft their own narratives, they are far more loyal to their illusions than they would ever be to your reality. They respond not to you, but to the shadow they've created in your silence. That shadow can walk through walls that a man of words never could. To control perception without effort is the highest form of influence. The man of silence does not impose his will through speeches or declarations. He simply exists quietly and allows the world to interpret him. His refusal to explain himself makes others explain him for him, and in doing so, they often say more about themselves than they realize. A man who accuses you of deception may be hiding something himself. One who assumes you are planning betrayal may be the one plotting. Your silence becomes a test, and most fail it by speaking too soon and too much. Even your enemies, uncertain of your intentions, will often hesitate. A declared enemy can be planned for. A silent one is paralyzing. They do not know if you are watching, waiting, or already acting. They become paranoid, always expecting a strike, always adjusting their behavior in response to a threat that may not even exist. Silence becomes your proxy on the battlefield. It wages war on your behalf, seeding confusion and doubt wherever it moves. In the court of public opinion, silence allows you to escape the traps others fall into. Where one man speaks in anger and must later apologize, your silence has cost you nothing. Where another tries to justify his weakness and is mocked for it, your silence makes no admission. You are immune to interpretation because you have given nothing concrete to interpret. You are immune to contradiction because there is no prior statement to contradict. Your silence gives you a kind of untouchable purity, an invincibility born not of perfection but of absence. Men seek control through domination, but true control is far more subtle. It lies in the ability to influence how others think without ever touching them. When you say nothing, you allow others to fill in the gaps, and in doing so, they begin to shape their world around the idea of you. You become more than a man. You become a myth, and a myth is more powerful than flesh, because a myth is immortal, unprovable, and capable of anything. They will fear what you might do, admire what they think you've done, and watch you closely for a sign that never comes. Your silence becomes prophecy, and in prophecy there is no debate, no denial, only belief. And belief, once planted, grows wild in the minds of men, unchecked, self-sustaining, and always in your favor in a world ruled by noise. Silence is the ultimate rebellion. It is not the absence of words. It is the presence of control. The one who remains quiet does not retreat from power. He redefines it. While others expose themselves through frantic speech, he builds his influence in the shadows, sculpting perception with stillness. His silence is not passive, but predatory. It watches, it calculates, it waits, and when it finally speaks, the world listens. Silence is the domain of the strategist, the language of kings, the shield of the disciplined, and the sword of the unseen. It dismantles enemies without drawing blood. It bends entire rooms without a raised voice. It fuels myths, triggers fear, and commands loyalty, not through persuasion, but through presence. In silence, you hold the leash of chaos while appearing untouched by it. You become what others cannot define, what they cannot predict, what they cannot control. Speak less, watch more. Say nothing when they expect everything, and you will rule not by voice, but by silence.